Have you got green fingers? What are green fingers? I'm going to tell you in this video how you can really fine tune and create your best green fingers. What I think it means is based on the old Chinese proverb, which basically is the shadow of a gardener is the best fertilizer. And what it means is that you just observe your garden, you watch it, and as soon as you see something's not going right, then you act upon it. And what you need to do is just stroll around your garden every day if possible, and don't just look in a very passive way, but really dig with your eyes and just observe very carefully. And in these next steps I'm going to take you through, I'll show you what you really need to look for. Come and look at my lilac, which had a bit of a problem recently. Now this lilac, which I took from a cutting, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, and I'd trained it up as a standard, and I've kept it in this pot. And I didn't cut the base out of the pot. Now, as you probably know, nearly all my pots in the garden, I've got about 100, are baseless pots. So it means that they look, they feed, they water themselves, and I don't have to apply anything. Now this one, because it's on these sets, I left it in the pot. And I noticed when I started feeding it this spring, or watering it this spring, the water just sat in the top. There was a problem. So as soon as I saw that, I tried to turn it over and open up the hole to make it drain, but it wasn't. It was so blocked it would not drain. So therefore I got an angle grinder and we cut off the bottom of the pot. I then pickaxed up, or with a bolster I lifted a few of the sets, took them out, put soil in the hole, and then put the plant back over the hole and then watered it. And I'm now going to water it maybe once a week for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month or two, until I know its roots have gone down below. And then I can just leave it for the rest of its life. So when you're watering a plant in a pot, or when you're looking after a plant in a pot, just bear in mind that it's most likely that after a long period, that compost will get very claggy, it won't drain, it will decompose, it will be losing its air in the compost, and you'll need to do something about it. You'll either need to repot it, put in a bigger pot, cut the base of the pot, or whatever. But you will notice, because the symptoms of drought and drowning are similar. The leaves go as though they are not getting any moisture because their root hairs are rotting off if it's wet. And so you need to do something about it. And plants in pots with their bases will always need watching over pretty regularly. Come and see my next point. This is my perennial meadow, which, if you saw the video, I laid it from a mat. It's got no grasses in it. Now weeds will come into it, grasses will naturally come into it, and other weeds that I don't want. So I need to watch out, and as soon as I see them coming, I need to pull them out. And weeds generally in the garden, if you want to have a pretty weed-free garden, you need to be on it. You need to see as soon as they start coming, and you want to pull them out, because that old adage that goes something like 1 year of weeds seeding is 7 years of weeding, I think is grossly wrong, because I think 1 year of weed seeds can mean 30 years of seeding. They just live in the ground and keep coming up. So I do go around the garden. When I'm checking around, I look for seeds. I have particular problem with bittercress, which comes in on plants that you buy in the top, and it flings out its seeds massively over a long period. Groundsel, things like that. So every time I'm watching out for weed seeds, I want to pick them before they set flower, hopefully, because often when they start to flower and you pull them out and just leave them on the ground, they will set seeds. So I take them right away. Things like groundsel are particularly bad at that. So this perennial meadow I'm thrilled with, and if I want to continue to be thrilled with, I'm going to watch out for dandelions and other things that I don't particularly want seeding in it. But generally I think it's absolutely fantastic. Now my next point. The other problem that lots of gardeners get are pests. And as you can see here, I've got these cabbages, Cavolo Nero, coming up. Now as soon as you put them in a brassica, you will get rabbits, you'll get pigeons, or I might get slugs, I might get aphids. So I tend to net them. And I think if you tend to just put them out and you don't net them, if you're not very careful, they will get there before you've covered them. So I tend to plant them out and put the net over them as soon as I can. But you definitely need to watch over them as soon as you've planted them out. Also slugs. I will put a few slug pellets around them if they're prone to slugs. And I use organic ones, ferric phosphate. And if the slug pellets stay there and you just put them on a few, just a very few, and if the slug pellets have gone, you know they've come and eaten them, so you need to put some more. And I go on applying more and more when they're taken away until they're no longer taking them. And then I know I'm okay. But always vegetables are prone to diseases. Here I've got my runners. I put them out and I thought I'll just cover them to let them get established with this white scaffold netting. Also, I wasn't sure about the weather. I'm going to lift it off now and they'll be able to get going. But I like to really watch them for the days after I've planted something out because I want successful crops. Over there you can see my lettuces that have been all through the winter. So I think I probably planted them out August, September. We've been eating them all through the winter and they're fine, they're hardy. And very soon we'll have finished them and move on to the next patch. But get to know your vegetables, get to know who else loves your vegetables as well as you, and protect them in good time. People find watering very difficult, and I think to water well, it is not an easy thing. But when you've got crops growing in the ground, like I have here, succulent crops like lettuces and things, if they get too dry, they don't produce so well. My young radishes here as well, I need to keep them quite well watered so that you get nice juicy radishes and they don't become all hard and woody. Also my basil crop, which looks a bit sad at the moment, they like a lot of water. So I do think generally that gardeners tend to water too often, but it's quite easy to spot when something is looking like it needs a drink. And if you watch them, just quickly monitor them every day, you will soon pick up the telltale signs. A plant really tells you when it's thirsty. And obviously anything in pots needs more watching over than anything in the ground. But basically it is worth knowing when certain things are best to water. So my mange 2s, my peas, my runner beans, when they start to flower and set fruit, you want to keep them nice and moist if you can. But on the other hand, I always remember an irrigation expert who told me when he was working in Greece, what he did is he used to flood the areas where they sowed the French beans before they sowed the beans. They then sowed the beans, then in the very wet soil in the late spring, and then the roots would chase the water down and they never watered them again. And that's in Greece, which is far hotter than here. But just having one good soak which pulled those roots down just made it so easy, and then they carried on being productive all year round. So just take care with your watering, watch your plants, and don't go away for 3 weeks and forget about them. It'll be a disaster. Now there are certain routines in gardening that are quite good to stick to, such as pruning your wisteria. I mean, I think everybody knows that to have a wisteria that flowers beautifully, perhaps the most orthodox way is to prune it back to 5 or 6 leaf buds in the summer and then back to 2 to 3 leaf buds in January or so. And that's tried and true, and as you can see, this is what mine does. So I have an aide-memoire, I have a little reminder for me to do that, to remember to do that. It is pretty well instilled in my brain. But having said that, some people do it quite differently. I know someone who inherited a fantastic wisteria, and all they did was pulled off any leaflets that got in the way when they walked by, whatever time of year, and it flowered beautifully. So don't get too hidebound about pruning. Generally in nature, nothing is pruned and everything flowers and fruits as it should pretty much. You know, dead wool will be pruned out in winter, in winds and storms. And you can go and do everything exactly by the book, and I'm sure it will be perfect. But if you forget or you don't quite know, it's not the end of the world. Your plants will still be pretty good. Gardeners always get worked up about how to feed their plants. But basically, I don't feed any of my plants in the ground with artificial fertilizers. All I do is put on a good layer, maybe once a year, 50 ml thick on all my borders, on my veg, on everything, of either ray meal, which I've got in this lovely pile here, which are wood chips from young wood, 60 to 70 mil thick, which I get free from my tree surgeon, or digestate, which I've got here, which I buy a load of. And this goes on my borders. It's weed free, it's a very good NPK balance, it's just about what they need. It helps suppress the weeds. I don't see anything looking yellow leaves and dying of sort of nitrogen shortage or anything like. It feeds the soil, feeds the plant, and it just makes it all so easy. I think what gardeners don't like are gaps in borders. So I think it's worth watching out, and if you've got things dying or something you don't like or you want to replace, having some backup. So here I've got quite a few of various different plants. I've got a load of zinnias I've sown, and some that I'm going to sow direct in the soil now in mid-May, and they will fill out and germinate very fast. I've got lots of these cuttings of Salvia Hadspen, which is hardy and which is just such a showy plant and grows to this big with lovely flowers. And I think just watch where you're going to have holes and make sure you've got something growing on that you can plug them with. Now gardens change all the time, and these got very shady. We had it arching over with a hornbeam arching over, these little serpentine paths which we put in recently. But actually by removing the top, it did mean that it let a lot of light into this area below. So we took out the grass and made use of the extra light by planting these borders. And I think, well, A, they're much easier than mowing the grass and they look better. They're still only just coming into their second year now, and I think they're fantastic. So just bear in mind, your garden will probably become shadier if you've got trees that are growing bigger. Maybe you need to lift the canopies, maybe you need to thin them out, maybe you need to remove some trees, and that will give you more light to use and actually grow things that you really enjoy. So just watch those shade levels, because they creep up on you and you don't really notice. We spend a lot of time growing fruits and veg, but you need to be really on it with harvesting. So when your new potatoes are just getting ready, how do you know when they're ready? You just need to go and inspect them and feel underneath and see if you can feel lovely little marble potatoes that are ready to harvest. Next door, where they grow acres, hundreds of acres of them, they actually will lift a plant, see what's there, and then put it back if it's not ready and give it a bit of water. It's the same with runner beans. You need to keep on harvesting as soon as they're ready. If you don't keep on harvesting, they will stop producing. Sweet corn, don't let it get too hard, but just peel back the leaves, put your finger in the kernels and see that they're just producing a lovely white milky juice, and you know they're ready for picking. And blueberries, I find the most difficult, because when the blueberries go blue, you might think they're ripe and you might pick them, but if you leave them just a few weeks longer or a bit longer, you'll find they'll get sweeter and sweeter. The problem is, it's a bit of a race between you and the birds, because the longer you leave them on, the sweeter they get, but the birds might get there first. So you will probably need to net them. And I will net mine with something like a 7mm hole size in my mesh, which I'll just drape over the plants, and that will keep the birds off. So just watch your crops. Don't let them get too woody. Just harvest them to keep them producing, particularly things like beans and courgettes and tomatoes and things like that, because if they've got lots of fruits on the plants, they're not going to produce more. Disease. People really worry about disease, and here you can see box blight. Now this is some old box that I've had for a long time. I will spray it and I'll spray it with Signum, and that will sort it. But generally, because I don't want to spray all the time, what I've done is replace most of our box with the blight resistant box, and that's been amazing. It's heritage. So just watch out for disease, because as soon as I see patches, you will need to be on it and spray it, and that will sort it. And that's the case with many diseases. Just watch out, and as soon as you see things not quite right, then sort them. So what you want to do is stroll around your garden regularly. Just have a good look with your eyes, maybe have a cup of coffee, maybe have a glass of wine, but just check it out. And if you see any problems arising or anything that needs doing, be there. And so you will have the most magnificent green fingers that you can get.